Give y'all a minute to get up in here. 'Cause I really got a question, and I'm not trying to be, you know, I ain't trying to start nothing. I'm just very curious. This is a question that I've been. Hold on. How the fuck did this happen? Hold on. Freedom marchers, freedom family, freedom lovers, truth seekers. How y'all doing this morning? It is 4:02 a.m. here in Georgia. It is Monday, February 20th, 2022. Yes, February 20th, 2022. And yeah, I got a question for y'all, man. You know, if you guys were here for that long ass live stream I did earlier, but it wasn't super long, but I appreciate you guys coming through for that. Listen to me ramble on about the shit I be rambling on about. But right now I have a question. Why do white people complain about racism? This is a serious question. And it's not every white person, right? It's particularly conservative white folks that complain about racism when they perceive it to be them, that they're, you know, when they perceive racism to be happening to them, that's when they complain about it and acknowledge it. But if it's directed at any other group of people, then they dismiss it. They say it doesn't exist. They say it's not a problem. And I'm just wondering, like, where they do that at. I'm serious. I'm really serious, like, because I have to wonder if that's productive. Is it productive or reductive to sit up here and act like racism against black people, against Hispanics, or any other group is a non-existent thing, or, you know, but when it happens, when you think it's happening, when white folks think it's happening to them, then they, you know, make a big stink about it. And what made me want to ask this question? What brought this to my mind? Well, I was watching Tim Pool's little show, and Coulter was on. You know, she's a journalist or whatever the case may be, and she was talking about the New York Times and how, you know, somebody from the New York Times still has some journalistic integrity and blah blah blah. And then Tim Pool chimed in and was like, what happens when he retires or something like that? It's probably going to become down with whiteness times, you know, down with whiteness, basically saying. And I thought that was very interesting because no one was talking about anything like that. But for some reason, this is what is on his mind. This whole idea of down with whiteness and there's racism toward white folks. I don't understand, right? I don't understand where this is coming from, right? Now, I know a lot of it has to do with CRT, critical race theory. This idea that critical race theory is in place to make white folks hate themselves and try to cause white guilt. I don't, you know, you have to be in control, right? You are in control of your own, how you react. You're in control of your emotions, right? You know, sometimes emotions come on, but that you can't necessarily control. But what you can control is how you react to that emotion coming up, how you behave in those emotions. You don't have to react a certain way, right? If you think critical race theory is, out to get white people and make white people think that they're inferior, or not white inferior, but that they're horrible people just because they're white, is that really what they're doing, or is that what you're getting from it based on historical references? That's my question. I don't really know. Like, when I was in college, right, back in last time I was in college, 2018. Or no, was it 20? No, hell no, it was 2017, somewhere around there. When I was when I was in college back then, I didn't, there was no critical race theory per se. There was none of that, and there was not a class called critical race theory. But it's like, I don't know what critical race theory necessarily teaches right now, because on one side you have them saying, well, it's teaching white people to self-hatred, right? But then you have the other side that says, no, it's just about talking about their place in history, right? How race relations affected the country and all this, that, and the third. I don't know, because I haven't really looked into it, because I'm not really interested in institutions and what institutions are teaching people. When I was in school, when I was in college, I was there for technical stuff, right? I was trying to learn geology and electrical engineering. That's what I was there for. I wasn't there for no sociology, bullshit, none of that type of shit, right? I wasn't doing liberal studies. So I'm just, so let's say, now we have to understand, people are a lot more sensitive these days, right? These new generations are a lot more sensitive, a lot more emotional. If a white kid learns about the history of his ancestors and feels guilty about that, I don't see how that is the fault of the course, right? If a course teaches that, white people have some level of privilege because of slavery, and how slavery ended, how black people were treated after slavery was abolished, and how about Jim Crow and the civil rights movement, and how white people had it easier because the dominant culture, right, the elite class, were made up mostly of white people. So that naturally, if you allow the elite class to control an entire country, and that elite class happens to be white, you know what I'm saying? And they're still coming out of slavery, they're still coming out of Jim Crow, there's still certain ideologies in a person's mind that it don't just go away because the Emancipation Proclamation was written, right? So, it doesn't work like that. Like, okay, we abolished slavery, now all of a sudden everybody loves each other, or racist people suddenly stop being racist. No, it takes time. It takes time to recover from that type of shit. And if a white person in school feels bad because of what their ancestors did, knowing that they were given a leg up because they white, they're not necessarily every white person's gonna get a leg up, but it's a greater chance. There's all kind of abandoned cars on the side of the road. There's a greater chance that you might get a leg up because you're white in certain instances, in certain areas, you know what I mean? Like, your family might be wealthy and you might be born into wealth, or you might be living in a fucking trailer park. You might be poor, but at the same time, there is evidence and data out there that shows that even the poorest white person has a better shot than the poorest black person, right? That's just the way it is. If if a poor white person decides to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make something, try a little harder to get out of their position, and try to get out of poverty, it'll probably be a little easier for that white person. That's just the way that's just the way it is. That's because there's evidence out there. Does that mean that every black person doesn't have a shot? No. That means that black people just have to work a little bit harder. That's all it is. Black people have to put in a little bit more work. They have to work a little harder. They have to go further and beyond to prove themselves out there in the workforce. They have to. It's just what it is. That's something that I saw getting into the electrical field, getting into construction, right? As an electrician, very few black electricians out there. And so, what's funny? I was watching something, and they were talking, I forgot who it was. They were talking about how one politician was pointing out that, I think it was Buttigieg or whatever. Pete Buttigieg was talking about how, you have all these white construction workers going into black neighborhoods and doing the work instead of these contractors hiring out of the community, right? Hiring people within the community to build to work within their community, to help build their community. And somebody was countering that, and the first thing he said was, I forgot who it was. Fuck, I hate that shit. What he said was basically saying that there were no skilled labor. There were no skilled laborers in those neighborhoods. How are you going to get them? How are you going to get? There aren't any like people in black neighborhoods aren't skilled laborers. Like, oh, there's no electricians in this black neighborhood. There's no plumbers. There's no carpenters. There's no skilled laborers in this neighborhood. So we have to hire people outside the neighborhood. It's not fucking true. It's not true. You know what I'm saying? I can tell you for a fact that the IBEWs, particularly in my local that I was in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s, refused, I'm talking about the unions, refused to allow black people to join the union, refused to let them join the apprenticeship programs. Okay? They did not want them. So even before that, but what's special about the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s is they would hire Hispanics. They would bring Hispanics on before they bring on black folks, right? If they needed people, they would completely overlook black people on purpose. We're talking about the local that I was in Los Angeles. They came into our class when I was in the apprenticeship program, and they told us about that. They said that we deliberately, well, not them, because it was the union officers before them, back in those times, they deliberately dismissed black people, wouldn't accept black people in the union on purpose, and that's how we lost so much market share. That's how the unions lost so much market share, particularly in LA, because they refused to hire, they refused to accept black people into the union. And that's why by the time I got in the union, there were very few black people. Very few black people. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, I would say that's a form of privilege, right? If you join the union, that's that's pretty prestigious. They ensure that you earn livable wages, that you earn good wages, or they're supposed to. That you're working in great conditions, that you have good infringed benefits. These are things that people benefited from by being in a union. And they did not want to allow black folks to benefit from that. So, listen, that's a form of systemic racism, right? But no, they don't want to say that. That's something that's taboo to say. We can't say that. We can't say the reality that not allowing black people to join the union for decades is systemic racism. No, we can't say that because there's no bylaw in the, there's nothing in the union bylaws that says, or the local bylaws that says that we can't hire black people. No, it's something that was understood among the union officers of those times. You don't need it to be written. You don't want it to be written because you don't want to get caught up in some bullshit. And the fact that they came and told us about that, I mean, it's very surprising. So, it's not like slavery ended, racism ended, prejudice ended, discrimination ended. No. No. It's not like Jim Crow technically ended, racism ended, discrimination ended, prejudice. No. This shit didn't just fucking stop. This idea that we're just supposed to get over it and like, don't think about it, don't worry about it. This shit was, it's not like that today. There's no such thing as systemic racism because there's no law, there's no thing written down, which is completely asinine to say. Completely asinine. But, look how quick some white people are to call out racism against white folks if something happens that they don't like, right? Down with whiteness and, pointing out things that are, endemic to a culture or endemic to a group of people is not necessarily racism, is it? But when you try to conflate, right? Who was it that said, B. Tatum said that black culture is this, that, and the third. And it basically like all things negative, right? But it's to assign that to black folks, come on now. But to simply point out that, racism in this country was heavily practiced by white people, that corporations ran by white people benefited greatly from slavery, that there is a certain level of, a head start or privilege that white people benefit from. Those are facts. Those are facts. Whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to say that the exoneration rates being heavily black, that the largest number of falsely accused, falsely imprisoned, and falsely sentenced people are black. That's not. Those things are real. Like these are residual effects. Real shit. These are residual effects of centuries of persecution. Centuries of persecution from one group to another. Now, is that to say, were there Native Americans that owned slaves? And yes, there were. Were there some black folks that owned slaves? Yes. But at the end of the day, what is the outcome of that, right? Are there wealthy families that exist today or wealthy black corporations that exist today that benefit now, and a lot of its wealth comes from slavery? No, right? It's not what it is. Native Americans. I mean, how greatly do they benefit now from slavery? Like, they don't benefit at all. They have been, their lands have been stolen, and now they're being pushed into reservations. Like, yeah, some tribes had slaves. Yeah, some tribes had slaves. But when it comes to things like reparations, how are we gonna get reparations from Native Americans? They don't. What level of wealth do they have? I know they got the casinos, but shit. How are they able to own slaves in the first place? Those black folks, very few families, very few black families own slaves. It's not like it was a proliferant thing. It wasn't something that was so widespread, and there were hundreds of families that owned slaves. No, it's not reality. But the bottom line is, if you are going to say, right, if you're going to talk about race baiting, if you're going to talk about how racism doesn't affect your daily life, then why complain about it when you think it's happening to you? Why complain about it? Why not just say, well, it's not affecting my life, I'm just going to move? Why even point it out? Why do we continue to bring up race? The only reason I brought it up is because I'm basically responding to Tim Pool bringing it up out of nowhere during his live stream. Like, what does that have to do with what Ann Coulter is talking about? It's what they call a dog whistle, right? Is that what a dog whistle is? It's a dog whistle. Why do people keep bringing up, like, say, if there's a shooting or something happens, right? Something happens somebody victimizes another person, and the person who's victimized happens to be black or white, and then the other person was white or black, or the opposite race. Why do we have to bring up their race? Why can't it just be about one person attacked another person, and that's a bad thing? That in and of itself is bad enough, right? Like, why put so much emphasis on police brutality from one person to another? If you are, especially if you're talking about, oh, we bring up race too much, there's too much race baiting, all this, that, and third, we need to get over it, there's no such thing as racism, then why constantly bring that up in your videos, right? It's sheer hypocrisy. Why bring it up, right? Like the shooting that happened, I think it was, I forgot where it was. I'm a little out of it right now from all the fucking driving and getting up mad early. But the shooter happened to be black, and there was so much emphasis on that from certain people, like, and maybe the news organizations didn't push the whole mass situation narrative because he was black, but I don't know how true that is, because I don't really follow mainstream media anymore. I do follow some of it if I feel like it's relevant to what I'm dealing with, but it is what it is. Oh man, Doraville Police. What is Doraville? Is that a place in Georgia? Well, it has to be in Georgia. Anyway, like, if we really want, if we really want to come together as a nation, right? Then, we really have to talk it like we talk it, right? If we want to say there's no such thing as racism, there's no this, there's no that, race isn't important, I don't see color, all this, that, and the third, then why don't we act like that? Why don't we act like that when we talk about these stories? Why do we complain about racism against white folks if we want to push this narrative that there's no such thing as racism? Well, if you're going to push that, if you're going to point it out when it's happening to white people, then don't get mad when black people are pointing it out when they feel like it's happening against black people. Let people have their say. Let people say what they want. We're so, we're constantly trying to, manipulate the situation, whether we're, trying to guilt people out of talking about race. Like, no, these things are important. If it's happening, we need to point it out. We need to be honest and real about what's actually going on instead of trying to sweep it under the rug and ignore it and try to act like it's not happening. That doesn't help anybody. Trying to hide our, try to bury our head in the sand when it's happening to certain people. But as soon as it happens to other people, then we want to raise our head up. Like, no, let's be consistent. Let's be honest about what's going on in the world. Let's be honest. You know what I'm saying? Like all the things that happen, everything. We want to, if we're going to sit up here and act like something doesn't exist, then we should be consistent. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? Because it simply does exist. It does exist. Redlining is real. Redistricting is real. That's part of human nature. Part of human nature like that. I mean, there's plenty of evidence of it. But we want to ignore the evidence. We want to ignore the evidence when, a police chief tells its police officers to set up black people. We want to ignore the evidence when, cops that work for the San Francisco Police Department send racist text messages back and forth to each other. We want to ignore the evidence when judges sell black kids up the river, or when forensic specialists falsify drug tests to get black people, to have black folks violate their parole or their probation and get them locked up. We want to ignore that shit. We want to act like it doesn't happen. But in reality, it does. Hatred exists. To say that there's no such thing as racism is to say that, there's no such thing as hatred towards a group of people. That's just, it exists, right? Hatred exists. We can't ignore hatred. We have to weed it out. If we allow hatred to fester and grow because we're ignoring it, then by the time you look up and realize how dangerous that is, it's already too late. It's already too late. But anyway, that's all I got, man. I just thought I'd come on and talk about that because either we think racism exists or we don't. Right? It can't just exist for white people and not for black people. Right? If you want to acknowledge racism toward white people, then how can you ignore the racism towards black people? And conversely, if you understand that racism against black people exists, then you have to acknowledge it when it happens to white people. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just real shit. Acknowledge it, resolve it, and move on. But ignoring it is not going to help. Anyway, that's all I got for now. I'll holler at y'all later, man. Man, I'm getting tired of this motherfucker. I don't know how I'm gonna last at work today, but you know, it is what it is. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, whatever, or don't, and keep marching forward toward freedom. Peace.